the day. So you'll see that here. And also just a few things to note that WebEx is our state mandated program. And we do have a guide. If you are new to using WebEx and you're having trouble, you can click on that link and that should be able to help you find some information that you need. So that is the WebEx Participants Guide. And then we have a few other links that you could just come to later as you wish to browse. That includes our YouTube playlist where all of our webinars are uploaded. This one is going to be recorded and uploaded there later for you to come back and watch or share with colleagues. And we do hope that you do that. And please sign up for our listserv if you are not already signed up there. And please remember to stay muted. We do have today's presentation on closed captioning to help you follow along. But if for some reason you cannot get your sound to work, remember again that we are recording and you can always go back and watch this recording later. We will send the recording to you in a follow-up email as well as posting that to our YouTube channel. All right, we will go ahead and move forward to start. So welcome to supporting neurodiverse students in arts education. This is part 1. Arts education for all students. This is part of our webinar series this year called Building Back Stronger. I'd like to take a moment just to introduce ourselves to you in case you don't already know who we are. We are the arts education team at DPI. I am Sayward Grindley and I am your K-12 dance and visual arts consultant. Brandon Rader is my team member. You'll hear from him in just a second. And he is your K-12 music and theater arts consultant for DPI. And if you don't already know, he and I work very closely together as a team on everything. So you can always copy us both on any communication. When one of us doesn't know the answer to something, the other one can most likely chime in. And we also have our wonderful section chief for social studies and arts education and former theater educator, Dr. Lori Major Carlin. Lori, would you like to say hi?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I know that Sayward and Brandon and company have prepared a fabulous webinar for you today, and thank you for sharing your time.
Thank you, Lori. We have several more guests with us today who we are really excited to hear from, but we will introduce each of them during their sections. As we move through our series, we want to encourage you to follow along in our reflection journal. You can get this journal by typing the bit.ly link that we're going to share in the chat, or you can click on the image of the journal in your slide deck. Or you can click on the link again that we have shared in the chat for you. You'll be directed to force copy or make a forced copy of the journal, which will allow you to create your own copy. We have preloaded that journal with links from the slide deck, so you don't need to spend any time copying down or looking up these links later. They'll all be in one place for you to be able to access. Additionally, this is also your artifact for proving that you attended today. So if you're watching this recording later, you'll be asked to upload a copy of your journal in order to receive your CEU certificate. If you are here with us live today, we have record of your attendance, so it is not required to upload your journal, but you're more than welcome to if you would still like to. All right, we'd like to start with a welcoming activity today. So we'd love for you to think about and share in the chat a time where it felt really great to be included in something, especially if you initially thought you'd be left out in some way. So feel free to put that in the chat, and I'm gonna put Brandon on the spot. I'm gonna let him share out loud.
Thanks. I was just writing it in. I remember, so I was fortunate enough as a freshman to be part of the select jazz ensemble at my high school, vocal jazz ensemble. And I remember being asked, at competition for a group of older ones to like, hey, come to lunch with us. And we went to the same fast food restaurant or whatever. And I felt seen. It was great.
And I see a few others here being picked last just before the cutoff to see a play or anything else. And Max says, I love my baseball team for this reason. Everyone gets to play no matter how good or not so good, and it's wonderful. Go Crawfish. And we have another one, being part of a roller derby team. Fantastic.
That's awesome. I love roller derby.
I will say for me personally, so I am not very musically inclined. Singing is not my specialty, but I have done a lot of musical theater, and the several shows that I was a part of, because I was a dancer, they worked really hard with me and would even say, if you're not comfortable singing, we can work with you and still make it work so that you can do the dance parts and do the parts that you feel comfortable doing. And so that felt really great that they were willing to work with me and my comfort zone there.
Thank you to everybody who's sharing.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this image here. See if you can read the cartoon. The image description says, this image is a one-frame comic. A man is shoveling snow off the stairs at a school or community building. Children gather, including one child who uses a wheelchair. The comic text says, child who uses wheelchair, could you please shovel the ramp? The adult shoveling the snow says, all these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I will clear the ramp for you. And the child who uses the wheelchair says, but if you would shovel the ramp, we can all get in. Any thoughts on this, or does it spark anything? Any reaction from you? Great. The logic of universal design, narrow thinking. That is brilliant. Great. Thanks for sharing. So for today's presentation, our goals are to help you gain confidence in supporting neurodiverse students within the arts ed classroom. We do that by understanding neurodiversity in arts ed students and what that might mean or look like. We will explain why it's important to support neurodiverse students and family members in arts education, identify resources for further PD and funding streams, and share some arts education success stories from across the state. I'm going to turn things over to Brandon now.
Someday I'm going to learn about that unmute button. I apologize. So today we're covering those teacher leadership specialist standards numbers 1 and 4, incorporating adult learning strategies and effective teaching practices as you implement change and facilitating the growth and development of educators. So as you know, any sort of EC or arts education leader who are these district or building-based professionals who help teachers become better teachers. And your support role involves direct interaction with teachers for the purpose of improving student learning and achievement. And you can learn more about these standards by clicking on the image where we've linked them. Additionally, teachers in North Carolina are evaluated yearly on the 5 teaching standards, and today we're focusing on Standard 2, which focuses on creating a respectful learning environment for a diverse population of students, including those who have special needs. So again, you can check out the the professional teaching standards at the link linked into the image, and then also the administrator guides, which are coordinated with the NECE standards. So in North Carolina, we teach within the Comprehensive Arts Education Framework for every child. The three components of the CAE, arts education, integration, and exposure, are independent and have been found by the Comprehensive Arts Education Task Force to be completely necessary. Arts education is the instruction of an arts discipline according to the standard course of study to develop the student as an artist. Arts integration is instruction designed to show students how non-arts content connects to arts content in both areas. And arts exposure gives students the opportunity to experience the arts as presented by professionals on a stage, in a gallery, or as a teaching artist in residence. And just as a three-legged stool cannot stand upright without one of its legs, an arts education without one of these components is incomplete for any student. Please feel free to learn more about CAE Framework by clicking on the links in or on the slide. So to support comprehensive arts education, the Arts Ed team at DPI works within the agency on a variety of teams and committees, directly with teachers and district arts education leaders, with statewide arts educator professional organizations, and within the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources organizations of the Arts Council, Symphony, and Art Museum as part of the comprehensive arts education team. Please let us know if there's anything we can do for you because we're only an email away. And the best way to stay connected is to make sure that you are signed up for our listserv. It generally comes out about twice a month, and Sayward will drop that link into the chat shortly so that you can make sure that you are subscribed. I'm going to pass it back over to Sayward to talk a little bit more about our framework for this year's professional development.
Thanks, Brandon. So we know that it is important for the professional development leader to make the transfer to arts ed instead of always placing that burden on the arts educator. That's why many of our webinars this year are geared directly for those district arts education leaders. And this webinar will be shared with all of them for them to watch and take back to their teachers. So this is especially important when presenting a new topic or one that might meet resistance. Asking the educator to interpret the content and imagine how to apply it to their own study sometimes can feel overwhelming or even beyond their capabilities at that moment and what they can take on. The primary intent of this process is to deliver professional development that is applicable, content-driven, and timely. But the secondary intent is to help your arts educators see how standard education research is equally applicable to them as any other content teacher, just like ELA, physics, PE, you name it. Over time, you will model as district leaders how to apply the arts ed filter to the canon of education research, and teachers will learn to do it themselves. If we simply expect teachers to be able to apply professional development with no arts ed context without educating them on how to make that transfer, teachers can become easily frustrated and feel that nothing applies to them. So we're hoping that you will take this information, look at it and how it can be beneficial for you and your district and your team, and then take it back to them to either share this video or create your own resources for your teachers and your own plan for your district. So as we move forward with this process today, we want to just remind you that we ask for you to take a look at these norms, these things that we expect from everyone as professionals. We want to stay solutions focused, listen with positive intent, keep an open mind, knowing that there may be some things that you've heard before, but just keep that mind open for what you're listening to. And you get out of this what you put into it, which is what we always say to our students, right? So we want to make sure that we're modeling that as well. All right, we will now move on to section 1 of our webinar today, where we introduce neurodiversity. We will hear a recorded video from our DPI consultant with the Exceptional Children's Division, Beverly Colwell.
My name is Beverly Colwell. I'm an exceptional children consultant at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction in the Exceptional Children Division. and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about neurodiversity. As you can imagine, this is one of those topics with differing opinions as to what it is, and there's not always a common agreed upon definition in the field. There is a growing movement in thinking. That is to think of neurodiversity as brain differences and not so much deficits. Neurodiversity refers to a concept that certain developmental disorders are normal variations in the brain. And people who have these features, these variations, also have certain strengths. Neurodiversity commonly refers to people with ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and other categories of learning disabilities, and may include students without an identified disability. The key is to focus on the individual characteristics of each student, their abilities, their strengths, and their support needs, and taking all of that into consideration and then setting high expectations. When recognizing strengths and needs of each student, it's important to leverage the strengths of each student, and that is good for all students. Now we're going to talk a little bit about policies and laws. The arts ed graduation requirement includes all students. That means each student. The Americans with Disabilities Act gives civil rights protections to individuals with disabilities. This is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination based on disability. It also prohibits other discrimination categories. However, since we're talking about students with disabilities today, we're really honing in on this being a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination based on disability. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, is the law that makes available a free, appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities, and it ensures special education and related services to those children. In addition, states have state policy that identifies how the state will implement IDEA. In North Carolina, we have the NC policy governing services for children with disabilities, which includes the specific requirements for the individual education program, the IEP, including supports and accommodations. The Section 504 requires that school districts provide a free, appropriate public education to qualified students who have a physical or a mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. There are specific requirements and criteria for determining a student is appropriate to have a 504 plan in place. Probably the best thing to do where federal law, IEPs, and 504s are concerned is to check first to see if a student has an IEP or a 504 plan in place, and then to collaborate with the EC and or the 504 representatives within your school and school district on the next steps. These are the representatives who will provide you with accurate guidance. Just one closing thought. You can't necessarily see neurodiversity from the outside. What you're likely to see are differences in accessing, interpreting, and interacting within the environment. That makes the adaptations put in place for that student critical to that student in making progress and meeting with success.
All right, thank you. So, we never know who is in an audience for a student performance, and sometimes parents, siblings, friends, or other family members may be struggling as participants. It's important that we not only focus on student performers, but anyone who might be engaged in the artistic experience. In addition to, again, the fact that every student is part of the arts ed graduation requirement. So every single student in North Carolina will be required to take one credit of arts education between grades 6 and 12, starting with next year's 6th graders. So we really want to make sure that we are equipped to teach every single student in the state. And so I would like to introduce Betsy Lidwig, who is the Executive Director of Arts Access Incorporated. And I know that she's going to do a better job introducing all of that than I will. So without any further ado, Betsy.
All right. Hi. Hey, Brandon. Is my video showing? Are you good? Okay.
Looks great.
Okay. First slide, please. So, hi, everybody. I'm Betsy, and I am the Executive Director of Arts Access. A few words about us. We are a North Carolina nonprofit. We've been around over 35 years. We're based in Wake County, but we do work to serve the state. It is me, along with our talented team of Megan Bostic, who you're going to hear from next week, and also Max Pulley, our newest staff member, and he is going to speak as part of my presentation today also. We don't provide the arts. We're really a service organization, so we do a lot of professional development and workshops. We provide a lot of resources to families. We support a lot of artists with disabilities through grants and networking. And another key thing we do is audio description. You're going to hear later from Felicia. She is our audio description coordinator, which is an awesome service for people who are blind or low vision to enjoy a play or a piece of art or a performance. We've got a very active and robust website and newsletter where we send out resources. So that's my official plug. If you don't know about us, check out our website. And as I told Brandon, one of the reasons I agreed to do this is we are a resource for you all on these professional development workshops. It's what we do. So if you're looking for that in the future, really want to let you know that that's what we do and would love to connect for future opportunities with the different arts, educational settings. All right, slide, Brandon, please. Okay, so what I'm going to focus on today, though, as it directly relates, is our Wake Arts Inclusion Project. About 5 years ago, we started a partnership with the John Rex Endowment. That is a large endowment based here in Wake County that funds children and youth, only in Wake County, but lots of outcomes related to health, social and emotional health. And so we started talking to them about a comprehensive project to impact school-age kids with disabilities in Wake County and increasing their accessibility to the arts. So that's the big project we did. There is a nice page on our website where you can get a slideshow and a lot of detail on that. It is a very big project. Megan Bostic is the coordinator of that, and we do lots of things, but I'm going to zero in on some things we've done in the school, Wake County Public Schools, that we felt really made a difference, and some ideas that are easily replicable for other school systems. So slide, please. So, you know, when you go to find money or you try and get people to value this, you kind of have to make your case. And so we know the arts are good. If you're an arts educator, I hope that's already part of your belief system and what you care about. We know the arts matter. And so there's lots of reasons arts are good for kids. But what we also know, and data supports, that kids with disabilities do not participate at the same rate as their peers. And if you look at data at school systems and you look at who is in the middle school and high school, art, music, dance, you know, upper level courses, when it's not automatically given like it is in elementary school, usually with the specials, the kids with disabilities are not participating at the same rate as non-disabled kids. So that's a barrier. There's something going on why this is not happening. So that was part of our data. We looked really hard at Wake County, you know, drilled down into that, who was in those classes, why and why not. And that's kind of how we got our funding. But it's also really good to, when you're making, why should a principal value this, or why is it important? It's inequitable. You know, equity, diversity, inclusion goals. These kids are not, it's not a level playing field for their participation. So slide. All right, then we did a survey. The survey is important because, well, so what are we going to do about it? You know, what's happening and where can we make an impact? We did a nice had a good response. About 175 folks talked to us, a lot of families, a lot of teachers, some adults with autism that had been through the school system, tried to reach everybody we could. But next slide. Survey said, ding, ding, ding. I should make that a more fun way I present that. But what came up was lack of training and knowledge for arts educators. We heard again and again, you know, I got my teaching degree, I was a musician and I got my teaching certificate, but I didn't get special ed. I didn't get training on how to work with kids with disabilities. This wasn't, or if I got it, it was, you know, one part of one class or one class. But now I'm a first, second, third year teacher, and I've got kids with autism, I've got kids blind and low vision, I've got kids with mobility or physical issues. You know, I wasn't prepared for all this. They're coming in my class, and I need more help. I need to know what to do. Then we got a lot of other good answers that related to the work. But so when we started addressing this, this was our first place we wanted to make an impact. Professional development for teachers. I could tell you more about the survey because it's actually fascinating. I'd be happy to share those results if people are interested. But next slide. So working in Wake County Public Schools, we started a series of professional development. Of course, this was, as I call it, the before times. 2018 and 19, it was a multi-year grant. We were doing all this in person. Look how crowded that room is. Gross. Who wants to go to that room? Not me. But we had a series of in-person workshops, and I'm just going to show you some of the main topics. Inclusion basics, where we just, for folks that were new to this, universal design for learning, basic accommodations for different disabilities, and then we got into how to implement those in your classroom. Next slide, please. I'm laughing how crowded that room is, gross. We do a lot of workshops on different art forms. So what somebody needs in a music classroom around accommodations and strategies is obviously different than maybe a theater teacher or a play and visual art teacher. So we started doing different workshops based on art forms, which is fun because we brought in people that were good at it. This actually is a workshop with a music therapist, and she was showing a lot of strategies around kids with autism, actually, in that picture. And so these were a group of music teachers getting ideas. Teachers always like to get their hands on stuff. So we were actually drumming, but they were talking about specific accommodations around, in that workshop, it was around music. So that's a series of workshops we do. Next one, please. Okay, so professional development. But then we were working with specific schools going, what's happening? What's the problem? And we heard that special ed teachers and the arts teachers don't have enough time together. They don't have enough communication. I get these kids, I'm doing quote marks, and I don't know anything about them. You know, nobody's told me, or I didn't understand that they needed this accommodation. So what we were hearing was a lack of communication and a lack of peer-to-peer time together. So we just did, in a couple of elementary schools, we did some really simple things. Peer observations. The special ed teacher would go in the arts classroom and the arts teacher would go in the special ed classroom. That was really, ended up being very powerful. And simple things like a schedule or how they structured things, or the atmosphere in the room with around noise or lights or seating, different things that kid was successful with because that special ed teacher knew them really well, or, you know, was teaching them all the time, that the art teacher could apply to their classroom. So this was something we do as a process, but that peer-to-peer learning, the partnerships between the special ed community and the kid, and the art or music teacher. And when I say the special ed community, I'm including the student, I'm including the family, I'm including the people at the IEP team. But who knows that kid, or how can the kid let you know what they need? But that time together. And then communicating with IAs, instructional assistants. Y'all probably know a lot of kids with disabilities might have an aide, or there might be aide in the classroom. Those people can be very key. And lots of times people don't think about them in the way that is as useful as it might be. What do they need to do if they're supporting somebody in the arts class, and what don't they need to do, i.e. do their artwork for them? That happens. So just a really keep partnership, and this is not fancy. This is just time and attention. And usually it was a principal or somebody that, you know, could do scheduling that helped us figure out how these two folks could have time together. Slide, please. I'm talking too much. Okay, this was a peer obs. We just created a form, so when somebody went in the classroom, they could make notes on different pieces of the learning materials, physical space, etc. Slide. Okay, another thing, people are doing field trips. These kids with disabilities are going on field trips at the school is, but oftentimes, oh, here's the history museum with 200 kids. Conversations about the field trips and outings and how you can be more thoughtful if accommodations are needed. So what you're seeing here, this is a contemporary art museum in downtown Raleigh, CAM as it's known, and there was a really fun fashion exhibit. And we had a couple of self-contained classes, meaning all kids with all disabilities had a field trip. But we worked with the museum on making that a really interesting, thoughtful experience for these kids, and modified some things. And it was just a ton of fun. That is me actually dancing to punk music. It was a 80s themed fashion thing. But it was versus just sticking kids in there going, okay, this is for y'all that do field trips. I mean, it can be hundreds of kids at a time, and it's often not very thoughtful, but some simple things like, well, where are you going on your field trip? Have you called the museum and made sure they're, you know, the docent or the educator is blah, blah, blah. So that was important at these schools. Slide. And then the last thing, teaching artists. I'm hoping we have people from all over the state here, but like in Durham and Wake County, there is a robust teaching artist program where artists come into the schools and do the residency-based programs. Through Durham, it's the Durham Arts Council. Here in Raleigh, it's through United Arts. But we first started out really closely with United Arts. So when they were their roster of teaching artists, we identified ones that were thoughtful and knowledgeable about occlusion. You can go to the United Arts site, teaching artist roster, and there's a code, so you can search for an artist that is not only skilled, but being especially thoughtful. So this is Jan, she's a weaver. We had her do a couple of residencies. She was learning herself how to be more inclusive. But what you see on the lower right is Jan talking to the special ed teacher and the art teacher. She was having a pre-meeting on what this group of kids needed. You know, were they readers? Were they tactile defensive? Blah, blah, blah. What did these kids need? And then she did this weaving residency, more knowledgeable and more thoughtful about it. But what was cool at the end is everybody, there was capacity building. People were getting better at this because, you know, even Jan talking to this group is like, oh, what about the next residency, the poetry residency? What would my kids need to be successful in here? So those are just some examples of what we did in schools that we think were working. We're still doing this. We're in our last year. We've gone to Zoom. We're doing some other stuff I won't fill your webinar time with today, but it's still going on. We're hoping for a continuation, but stay tuned. But we're through this next summer. Slide. I think that was me. Just some fun quotes. This was something. This is a teacher quote. I felt awkward and clumsy, but now I love it, and now they're my favorite students. I think you have to think of teachers just like your students. You know, feeling empowered, sometimes through knowledge, sometimes through respect, whatever it takes to value the teachers and give them what they need can really turn around. I have never found a teacher that's like, I don't want those kids in my class, or, you know, I don't believe in this. Everybody would, well, there's the occasional one. No, 98% of all teachers really want to do a better job with this. So when you give them the tools, it's very exciting to see that they're more successful at this process. One more quote. Brandon, slide. Blah, blah. Let me see. There's something in here. I was, oh, this was about the two teachers talking together. And this was really fun. For her, realizing everything doesn't have to be so structured. That was a special ed teacher realizing that. And me seeing how beneficial structure can be. And so I put this quote in here because it's about, you know, we're talking about neurodiversity and autism, and you hear a lot about structure and the classroom and the picture schedules. That's cool, but sometimes a kid goes in an arts classroom and can blossom and do something that nobody ever thought they could do. You know, so that's the power of art. But I love that quote. Okay, I'm about 2 minutes. So now, one of the things Megan and I and our work at Arts Access, representation. If you are doing this work, or you're trying to be more thoughtful about inclusion, making sure that kids see people like themselves. And so if you're talking about famous people and famous artists, or you're bringing in speakers, or you're bringing in teacher artists, bringing in people with disabilities, bringing in disabled artists, just, diversity, equity, inclusion, where does disability fit in that lens? So in all of our work, we try and center people with disabilities. I consider myself an ally, but it's just really important. So along that line, I asked our newest staff member, Max, to speak today. Max has a couple of roles, and she's going to introduce herself, but she's program coordinator for Arts Access. She works at Sertoma Arts Center in North Raleigh, and she runs her sensory friendly mornings. But I'm going to turn it over to Max to tell you more and share some of her lived experience with this. Max?
Yes. Hi. So I'm Max. I am autistic, so that's why I'm here to talk today. So that's my lived experience every day, 24/7. I am teaching sensory friendly at Sir Toma Art Center, so I am an art teacher, but I also work now at Arts Access. Um, so so that's kind of my background. I graduated from Appalachian State University. So I am here today to talk about that, but I'm also here to talk about some of my experiences, positive and negative, with the arts within education. So when I was kind of reflecting on my experience in school, I will say to start with, I didn't really get a lot of opportunity to do a lot of arts in school. I was removed from most of my arts classes because every time I was taken out of a class to be put in remedial classes to try to get me caught up to the level that everybody else was on with reading or math, whatever the other students were learning at the time, which was sad because I didn't really know what I even liked. All I knew was schoolwork. I was doing school, and then I was doing tutoring, and then I was doing about 6 hours of homework every night. So it was bad. So that was pretty much my art experience. Then when I first got into some art classes, I have some positives and I have some negatives there as well. My first experience with an actual, I would say, what you think of when you go into an art class, with the paints and everything around you, that experience wasn't very, it wasn't very great. It was very difficult for me. It was very rigid. So coming from already having extremely rigid schedule to having a more rigid schedule in a place that looked like it should be fun was very difficult. I was given a lot of projects that were very stressful for me in one way, shape, or form. One particular one that to this day I still think of. We had to make a a it was like a sculpture of our face. And that sounds like a great project, but at the time when you're being severely bullied, to make a sculpture of the thing you hate so badly, and to try to express that to the teacher and not have another alternative, and then kind of be forced through that, was very difficult. And then also just the sensory having to touch it. So that wasn't great. It would have been nice to have maybe some alternatives there, and also maybe some scheduling, some things written down. That would have been helpful. But on the positive side, I had some arts classes that I actually went into thinking were going to be horrible and ended up being wonderful. I had a dance class and a music class. The dance class, was one of those that I went into thinking I was not going to enjoy it because of the fact that I was currently being bullied so badly. It was very scary to be up on stage and to have people watching me. But yet this particular dance teacher had expressed to us in one of the first classes that as a child, she actually had to wear a back brace every day in order to pursue her dream of being able to dance because she had some, I guess, multiskeletal disorders. And so she was wonderful with making changes to moves, letting you wear whatever you wanted to wear when we got ready to do performances. Or if you just wanted to work backstage, that was fine. At the end, when we got close to test taking time, we usually didn't actually have a class. We usually had like a meditation type session, which was wonderful. So it was really, really nice. Very, very inclusive, I felt like. And then the other one was my music teacher. I went in, I told her right away that I was scared to death to have to take it because I felt like it was going to be another thing I was going to have to try to learn how to read. And I just couldn't imagine trying to learn another thing to read. And she said, "Don't worry about it. You're just here to have fun. I want you to just be able to participate. And as long as you can learn, the words to the song, you're going to be fine." She ended up being a safe place for me. She ended up opening up her classroom whenever she was there and whenever I had kind of free time in between classes that I could go and either help her with stuff or could come in and sit down and work on homework or something just to kind of get away from the other places in the school. And that was really the first time I had anywhere to go like that and had somebody that really cared and paid attention. So, those were not, they weren't directly helping me with schoolwork, but they were helping me just giving me a safe place to go and a place I could escape. And so I still remember who they were and I still think of them often. So there's impacts that can be made. Um, they seem small, but they're really big when you don't have it anywhere else. So yeah, that was my experience in school.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really great to hear exactly from the field. And we will be in part two hearing another student voice, and we'll be hearing from teachers who are trying to meet those needs and create all of those small moments to support their students. So thank you so much, Max.
Yes, of course.
All right. So in speaking about sensory friendly, we wanted to just share with you this resource, which is the Kennedy Center's Sensory Friendly Programming for People with Social and Cognitive Disabilities. And they have a wonderful handbook created specifically for assisting organizations or schools in creating sensory friendly experiences so that anyone who wants to experience the arts actually can. And as Beverly noted at the beginning of our webinar today, often people who with sensory, social, or learning disabilities aren't identifiable by anything on the outside, and there's no way that we would know from looking that they need accommodations. But being proactive for creating those accommodations for that set of audience members allows everyone to participate in a way that's not intrusive to them or to others. And in fact, other audience members may find these accommodations to be helpful as well. So here's a short list of some common diverse actions and how they might surface in the performing arts setting. So if you can take a moment to see if you have recognized any of these in yourself, your students, or in fellow audience members. You don't have to write them into the chat, but go ahead and just take a note of that. As Sayward and I were looking through this list originally, we're like, oh, I've done that. Oh, my kid does that. I'm sure that people are familiar with these. And here are a few more. Sorry to rush you through if you're still reading, but you can access this this resource at the link in the bottom or at the link in your participant notes. So the North Carolina Symphony has experience in creating one of these sensory-friendly experiences. And so we've invited Jason Spencer, who is the education director for the North Carolina Symphony, to share about their journey from their initial concept to their execution. So Jason, feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Brandon, for inviting me to share a little bit about our journey at the North Carolina Symphony into the sensory-friendly world. And I say journey because this is a constant journey for us. When we came into this, creating a sensory-friendly concert, we didn't have the experience. It started 4, 5, 6 years ago, actually. And we were able to put together this sensory-friendly concert, which I'll share a little bit about today, and maybe you'll hear about it. Identify some ways that maybe you can take some of this to your teachers, share a little bit about our journey looking ahead. So if you aren't familiar with the North Carolina Symphony, we are a statewide organization now in 75 plus years of education concerts, classical concerts, serving the entire state through music. One of the audiences that we do not reach regularly is those with cognitive and intellectual and developmental disabilities. So 4 or 5 years ago, our music director at the time, Grant Llewellyn, created a sensory-friendly concert with his other orchestra overseas in Europe with a co-host, Andy Pidcock. And together, they created a sensory-friendly concert that was well received by everyone. He wanted to come back over the pond and create a similar experience for the residents of North Carolina. And that all came together in September 2019. So now 2 years ago, I know it's 2 years ago, but we've also been in COVID for almost 2 years. So it's really hard to believe that it's been 2 years, but we are still on that journey. So I just want to kind of walk you through the process. So the mission of that sensory-friendly concert was to broaden our reach by giving accessible performances geared towards people with disabilities throughout the state. As with anything, research is a key part of it, and we did our fair share of research leading up to this by participating in some of the workshops that Betsy mentioned. I know we were part of the Wake Arts Inclusion Project. We're also part of the City of Raleigh's Universal Access community, Universal Access Community. And I know some others on this call are part of that as well. But during our research, we were collecting information from local arts organizations, cultural organizations, including Marbles, DPAC. We even reached out to the Kennedy Center for their invaluable help and support for this. We also put together an advisory committee to help us guide our planning that was comprised of board members, staff members, EC teachers, and adults and students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And they were the key components of helping us plan this exciting concert. So the next slide is talking a little bit about the planning and implementation. So talking about how this all came together, what were some of the accommodations we were making. You see the flyer there. First off, tickets, just $5. This was a 1-hour concert that we wanted to be open to everyone. There's a stigma in classical music that there's a certain type of etiquette, doors must be closed. We wanted to remove all the barriers of a normal classical concert and really make it open to anyone. So we had low ticket prices, a flexible refund policy. If your child or student or adult wasn't feeling up for the experience the day of the concert, you can get a refund just fine. General admission seating. So if you don't want to sit up front, you can sit in the upper balcony, sit wherever you want. We created a social story or a social narrative for families to use ahead of time so they know exactly what to see and to expect during the sensory-friendly concert. The lobby experience, we had dozens of volunteers on hand to help make this the best experience for everyone coming to our concert hall in Raleigh. We offered a pre-concert training session for the ushers, volunteers, and staff members. We had quiet rooms, we had sensory kits. Actually, I've got one of the sensory kits right here. I actually have a handful. And inside a sensory kit, we had about 200 of these available. You had a stress ball, a fidget spinner, and I don't even know what this thing was. It was just something that bent around, and it's a sensory toy. And that was for anybody that wanted one. They could get one from the box office. and just kind of have something in their hands while experiencing the concert. Printed programs, lobby activities. We had an instrument zoo where children and adults could play the instruments before the concert. Those days are kind of with COVID, we're not doing instrument zoos anymore, but it was such a wonderful experience. And of course, creating the program was the work of our music director and his co-host, Andy Pidcock. So lots of excitement with the program. We had musicians in costume. It was fast-paced. The orchestra was color-coded in what they were wearing. I think the next slide shows some of the pictures to go along with it. So in the top left, you see the training session that was led by Easter Seals, an organization based in Raleigh. In the middle there, you see the program. We actually had it brailled for anybody that needed it. We offered a brailled program. We had a quiet room. We had an audio describer. In the bottom left, you see that instrument zoo where our volunteers were helping students or children hold the instruments and play them. In the bottom, you see the full orchestra. You can see the blue shirts are the string players, green are our woodwinds, yellow are our brass, and then the red shirts in the back are the percussionists. So color coding the orchestra, really an awesome way to showcase all the different sections of the orchestra. And then at the end, you can see one of the children came up on stage and was able to play the bass drum with our percussionist behind him. So really an inclusive opportunity for everybody to be involved in this exciting concert. The next slide, I believe, is just some feedback. And this is really where it struck us, how much this concert and this experience meant. And it's what's propelling us onto this journey and into the future. And so this will not be the last time we do a sensory-friendly concert, but just some of the great quotes. I like the second one. This concert was a dream come true. Our daughter loves music, but we never thought the symphony would be possible for her. Thank you for making it possible. Opening the doors to those that might not have been able to come or might not have seen an opportunity to come see the symphony before. So obviously this was one of the highlights of our journey 2 years ago, and I certainly hope we can continue it in the future. COVID kind of changed the plans last year, and then this year we're just trying to get back to normal. So hopefully maybe next year we begin another sensory-friendly concert. So the next slide is, again, looking on that journey ahead. So what's next with all this? We're continuing our participation in the City of Raleigh's Arts Learning Community for Universal Access. The Kennedy Center is hosting a fantastic conference this August right here in Raleigh. So we are very fortunate. It's the Leadership Exchange in Arts and Disabilities Conference. It'll be held first few days of August. So I highly encourage you to check it out. We're also exploring adapting existing programs to be inclusive for everyone. And part of that adapting programs begins with a conversation and a discussion with teachers, EC teachers or organizations that specialize in autism, and working with them to develop programs. That is such an important part of this, is making sure they have a voice and that we are working with teachers to adapt our programs. So just in some of these pictures, the top left is actually a picture from this summer. Our trombonist, Matthew Neff, went out to New Bern. Monarch NC is a statewide organization that helps children and adults with disabilities. So we were fortunate to go out to one of their adult facilities out in New Bern. And our musician played a little bit, talked a little bit about how music and emotions connect. In the top right, we had a guest artist, Zool Bailey, visit a few years ago. This is Able to Serve. It's an organization in Southern Raleigh that focuses on adults with disabilities. And in the bottom left, there's a picture of Caroline Shaw, a very prominent composer, visiting the Moorhead School for the Blind, again, a few years ago when she was in town. And in the bottom right is Andy Pidcock, that co-host that our music director brought for our sensory-friendly concert. He was visiting a classroom out in Durham County. So again, trying to get into the classroom, into the facilities, and meeting the needs of students and adults with disabilities. Something that we're really excited about maybe in the future is offering an education concert, a sensory-friendly education concert. These are the concerts where we welcome students from around the state, fourth graders primarily, to our concert hall. and finding a way to adapt that to be sensory friendly. That could be something that we do in the future as well. So that's just kind of a glimpse into our sensory friendly journey. If you are interested in having, a small ensemble or a musician come out to one of your schools, maybe you have a classroom of EC students, we would love to be part of that. Please feel free to reach out. My contact information is in the slide. We want to be, your orchestra. We are the North Carolina Symphony, so we do represent the entire state. Wherever you are, we would love to come out and see you and your students. So please do feel free to get in touch. Thank you all for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Jason. We really appreciate you being here. So another organization that is doing a lot in this same topic is the North Carolina Museum of Art. So we'd love to have Felicia Ingram, the manager of interpretation, accessibility, and diversity at the North Carolina Museum of Art, to share about their upcoming exhibit, Participate. Felicia?
Great, thank you so much. Actually, if you could go back one slide, I'm just going to explain my job title a little bit because it's kind of a mouthful. But my name's Felicia Ingram. I work at the North Carolina Museum of Art. And my role is like these two relatively big components that blend really well together. So accessibility and diversity is relatively straightforward. It's why many of you are here, to make your classrooms more accessible, and I'm here to make the museum more accessible. Interpretation is the creation of different interactives, immersive rooms, family spaces for the museum. So other than the label, how can families, students, teachers interact with the art beyond reading? I handle scavenger hunts. I handle, right now we have a family ancient art lounge in the building. So things of that nature. So next slide, I'll be talking today about a combination of those two things, and how I use interpretation and accessibility to help to co-curate an upcoming exhibition opening actually next week on Saturday. So we're going to talk about Participate, which is the name of the exhibition. One of the curators had approached me, and she had asked me, what if you could smell a still life? So we were kind of exploring that question. Life with cherries and cheese. I should say this, my internet is really terrible at the museum. So I'm frozen, but I'm hoping everyone can still hear me. I think some thumbs up. And so that was kind of an interesting question. And we're always looking, of course, from our strategic plan and our mission, right? And so two big goals that interpretation has at the top, which is this idea of like increasing access to art. Art, nature, people is kind of our motto here at the museum. And then we want to highlight these multiple diverse histories, voices, perspectives in different types of collections, exhibition, displays, and programming, right? And so my position, I live in the education department, but I do so much with exhibition design and exhibition development, and how to make those exhibitions accessible from a physical standpoint, wheelchairs and things like that, but also for neurodiverse audience and things like that. So we're kind of batting around this question, right? And then this past year, we had developed a program called the Sensory Journey Through Art. This was intended for low vision. However, it does come with a sensory kit. So it can be adapted to various different audiences, and we focus on one piece of art every month. Participants are sent, again, a sensory kit. So there's something smellable, like, is that a word? Something you smell, edible, something you can eat, and something you can touch. So in the past, we've had like paint chips. We actually have on Thursday, it's all about chocolate. So we're sending chocolate in all the different forms. So like vanilla and cacao beans and all this cool stuff. And so I was kind of thinking about that, because those have really taken off, especially with the low vision community. So I was like, how can we kind of make this an exhibition, right? Because that's a program, right, that we have virtual every month. And then of course, I'm always trying to think like, how can we make the collection itself more accessible, right? Like, we are always changing special exhibitions and this and that, but how can I make our permanent collection more accessible? So the curator and I developed Participate, and it's 8 pieces of art, and they each have a sensory station. So if you go to the next slide, I have examples of 2 of them. And so the first one is, this is called Wonderous Birds. The painting is on the left and the design drawing is on the right. And a big part of this painting that was, for those of you that are interested in art history, is that the painting is at eye level with the birds. So instead of looking up, like you're looking at the birds, you're in air with them. So the thought was, well, let's add some sounds and some wind. So we're literally putting a fan next to the painting, and you can have these sounds and these fans. And so what we did to help develop the exhibition is we worked with what the museum has is our Accessibility Stakeholders Committee. It's a group of about 20 either individuals that identify as having a disability or have a family member with a disability. So we have a few parents that have neurodiverse children or a few with cerebral palsy. So we were kind of running these ideas by them. And one of the parents was like, well, this might be sensory overload for my child because it's 8 different pieces of art. Almost all of them is sound. This one happens to have, wind, quote unquote. You're not going to get blown away, but you will feel that idea of this, wind, this passing breeze. So I'm like, okay, how can we adapt this so it can be, more friendly for everyone? So now, and this also worked out, actually, the conservators enjoyed this. Everything has to be like activated. So if you don't want the wind, if that's too much sensory overload for your child or student, that's okay. Just there's a certain line you have to cross, and if you stay behind the line, you can get the birds and the sounds from someone else doing it, or you can stand back and just have that visual there. So we use our Accessibility Stakeholders Committee to influence not only the exhibitions like this one, but the park. We have a 164-acre park, different programming and things like that. And so that group meets 4 times a year. And I was recently in a seminar, and it was an African-American gentleman talking about, exhibitions on slavery and things like that, talking about the African-American community. And he said, you can't do things about us without us. So I always try to involve my Accessibility Stakeholders Committee when needed. And I'll get into more of the future later. I want to talk about one more if you go to the next slide. The other one I'm really excited about, this is for more of the low vision community. However, it does have a tactile feature. So this is the allegorical portrait on the left, and we've made a digital tactile replica. So different parts of the painting have been elevated and made into what they call a skin. And so it's on a monitor, and when you touch the different pieces of the skin, you can feel different textures. Like her hair is very curly, so there's very curly textures. Her dress has this more kind of wavy texture. And then in addition, since it's on the monitor, each piece has audio description. So if you touch the woman in the middle, that'll have its own audio description. If you touch the painting on the left, that'll have its own, and so on and so forth. So again, each of these 8 pieces of artwork have some type of interactive or accessible station to go with the art to elevate that, right? My husband is visually impaired, so a lot of that too is like, how can we look at art without our eyes? And so yeah, so this is gonna be really cool. I'm really, really excited for the show. If you go to the next page, a big part of what this exhibition is doing is looking to the future. So these 8 interactive stations are gonna move eventually into our permanent collection. So right now they're gonna be all together in a permanent exhibition, but eventually they'll move and be incorporated in the galleries. And before they move, we're gonna bring back the Stakeholders Committee and actually test the design, right? So unfortunately, due to the speed, the rapid pace we had to make this, we weren't able to user test as much as I would have liked to, but we're going to bring in community members, again, from the Stakeholders Committee to actually test the interactives. We've done that many times before. The picture in the center is actually Betsy, and one of her board members, I think, Ronnie, we were doing some label research about the size and different fonts. So that's something, again, involving the community and making it there for them. The other thing that we do a lot that I've been trying to do more of is developing multiple ways of engagement, right? So you can look at the art, you could feel the art, you could, in a case of wind, right, you could also feel that. And so how can you and your students engage with art in more than just one way, right? Like what other ways can you create for your students to activate, visual arts? We'll have ASL tours, audio description tours, and then again, we're going to move all of these into the future and hope to make the entire building, and we have these 2 large buildings, into a more of a tactile and friendly experience. But then of course we have some of the things I think Jason brought up, we have the headphones, right? So again, for those students that might have sensory overload, there are ways to tone it back if that's what the student needs, but trying to cater to everyone and doing our best to do that. As a side note, because Betsy did bring it up, I am the audio description coordinator for Arts Access. So in my, my spare time, that's another hat I wear. And if you have any questions about audio description, obviously Betsy can answer that, or you can email audiodescription@artsaccessinc.org.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Felicia, for joining us and sharing all of that wonderful information. So as we move forward with part 3, we really want you to start thinking about, all right, this was a lot of information and great examples of how these larger organizations are doing things that you can access for arts exposure for your kids, right? Thinking about field trips or teaching artists. So we want to make sure that you include that. And as a reminder, our next session will dive into those really classroom practices. But this is really thinking about some organizations and resources that can help you in devising a plan for your district and your teachers. So let's dive into just a couple of these resources to recap. So first, obviously, working with your EC department is really important. That's going to be the key to making sure that you're understanding what your students' needs are and how to best meet them. Those are the teachers that really know those kids the best. And by working directly with them, you can really develop a plan. And so by getting the arts teachers and the EC department together, you could really come up with some great things for your classroom settings, for your performances, how to reach your family members. So really thinking about the bigger picture there. And then we have Arts Access information there with their professional development resource directory. So Betsy gave a lot of information, and her contact information is at the beginning of the slide deck as well. So you want to come back and look at all the great things that they have. We talked a little bit about the Kennedy Center sensory friendly programming toolkit there. It's a guidebook for sensory friendly programming for people with social and cognitive disabilities. So you'll find lots of great information there. And as Jason also mentioned, that the conference is coming in August to Raleigh. So you could either participate by coming to that conference or by submitting a proposal to present. And then down at the bottom, Betsy also mentioned the United Arts Council that primarily works in Wake County, but it's also a really great resource, their teaching artist directory that was created for students with disabilities. So we hope that you'll come back to some of this information when you start thinking about your plan. But next, we'd love to introduce another big resource for you. This is Kathleen Collier, we want to introduce, who is the Arts and Education Director and Accessibility Coordinator for the North Carolina Arts Council. She will let you know how the Arts Council and can be another great resource for you in this work. So Kathleen, we're happy to have you.
Thanks, Sayward. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet you virtually. And I've enjoyed all these presentations. I'm so excited. It's amazing all the incredible work that's happening in the state. So as Sayward mentioned, I'm Kathleen, and the North Carolina Arts Council is an agency within the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So our whole mission is for the arts for all people, and we do that through our statewide grant programs and arts initiatives. Today, I'm just going to share with you a little bit more information about our Arts and Education Artist Residency Grant. As the Arts and Education Director, this is one of the programs I help manage, and it's a category that's designed to give schools and school districts funding to bring teaching artists into the classroom. We'll be publishing our grant opportunities for the next year, so projects that can take place of fall 2022 or spring 2023 in January. So please stay tuned. Feel free to contact me or sign up for our e-newsletter, because again, we'll have more information with regards to application deadlines and specifics in January. But just to give you kind of a brief general overview of this grant category, it promotes a 10-day, it funds a 10-day or longer artist residency. So those could be consecutive 10 days or spread out over a semester or school year. Grant amounts range from $5,000 to $15,000, and they could be used to go towards paying artist fees, marketing, supplies, travel for your teaching artists, etc. And all grants must be matched dollar to dollar, except for those serving in rural low wealth counties, such as Tier 1 counties, are eligible for a 75 to 100% funding. However, I'm happy to really think creatively with you when we're thinking about a budget, because there's sometimes ways we can certainly think about and consider teachers' time in assisting with the project in the classroom and things like that. So we can get a little creative. I definitely would recommend that you check out our website for more details. And again, I was hoping to be more updated by now, but definitely check it out in January where we'll have more specifics on there. But part of my role, I'm not part of the review process. My role is to serve as a resource for you, the applicant. So I'm more than happy to help with any budgets, review applications, and provide feedback before it goes to panel for final review. And I just want to say this is one of my favorite grant categories here at the Arts Council. It's not only an awesome experience for students in the classroom, but as Betsy mentioned in her presentation, these artist residencies are great professional development, experiential learning experiences for your teachers as well. So I hope you'll consider applying, and I'm more than happy to help throughout the grants process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. All right, so in addition to actually bringing teaching artists in, you might be looking at how to develop your arts educators on how to do this more effectively. And so I just wanted to bring to attention that this is not an arts ed specific topic. So meeting the needs of neurodiverse students and EC students is something that is more than just Title IV Part A funds, which is usually used for arts education. Both Title I and Title II funds from ESSA may be eligible funding sources. So you'll want to check with both your EC and your federal programs directors to explore those options. But more than just Title IV funds could be available to you, as this is really about meeting the needs of all students. And as Beverly shared earlier, we are bound by lots of different policies to actually deliver that quality education to each and every child in the state. Additionally, ESSER III funds could be used to support learning loss and strengthen programs. So if your arts ed programs are not serving EC population right now due to a lack of training or adaptive materials, which you'll learn more about in the next webinar, using ESSER III funding to purchase those might be allowable if it should result in rebuilding the programs. So you can check with your federal programs director again for more information, along with the Arts Education Leadership Coalition recommendations for acceptable uses of ESSER III funding. So those are just some out of the box ways that you might be able to fund arts educator professional development beyond just the typical Title IV Part A funds or local funds. All right. So as we close out today, we have some next steps for everyone to consider, especially those EC and arts ed directors, but also teachers. So as you reflect on the arts education program in your school or LEA, are neurodiverse students being included in the classroom instruction, or are they being asked not to participate? Whether it's being asked not to participate in the inclusion classroom or to be separate, or just that they don't receive the service. Thinking about whether or not arts ed teachers have been trained or prepared to adapt curricula, materials, and instructional practices to meet the needs of EC students, or whether they're just being baptized by fire. And then whether or not Title II funds are being used to develop all teachers, including arts ed teachers or those specials or enhancement teachers, in ways to help their EC students become successful in their content area classrooms. All right, Sayward's going to walk you through some more thoughts.
So when you're having your students to, when you're thinking about how you're going to give your students arts exposure as part of comprehensive arts education, just as we were talking about before, consider these questions. Are your neurodiverse students included in field trips or assemblies thoughtfully? So just as we talked about field trips in those larger group settings, think about that in your school and your assemblies. And when you bring a performer or somebody into the school, Are those students able to sit in the assembly comfortably, or are there some other services that you can be thinking of, especially pulling from these great examples that we've had earlier from these organizations who are doing it and doing it well? What are some things that you could borrow to think about? Are field trips and teaching artists prepared to adapt their materials to include neurodiverse students? Are you letting those teachers or teaching artists know who they will be teaching when they get there, and what their needs might be in the classroom or the workshop? So depending on whether you're going to be those teaching artists in the classroom or in a special place like the gymnasium or the cafeteria or outside, are you preparing those teaching artists to say, this is what this student needs and this is how this student works well, just so that they're prepared when they walk into the classroom and they can plan? And then also, is there a plan B for neurodiverse students on field trips or with teaching artists or in assemblies or concerts? Do you have a plan if something is not working to be able to give them an alternate assignment, as Betsy mentioned earlier, another way to meet that goal, right? So that they could experience it in a way that makes sense for them. So we are really looking forward to part 2 on Wednesday. So we hope that you will join us for that. And we have some really exciting things planned for you and some wonderful teachers that you will hear from. You'll see a choir performance of all neurodiverse students. That's really fabulous. You'll hear additionally from another student voice and hear from him directly of how the arts has impacted him. And you'll hear from teachers about classroom applications in all 4 arts areas. So really concrete, tangible things that you could borrow, take with you and plan in your own classrooms or your programs, or district leaders that you could take back to your teachers and share and say, these are some great things we could try. So again, then you will hopefully leave the end of that with a plan for your next steps in making sure that your district is fully equipped for this. All right, so as part of our optimistic closure today, we would love for you to share one of these questions in the chat. So you might take a moment to just think. Of course, you're welcome to answer more than one, but we'd love for you to share one. Yes, you can still register for Wednesday's session, and we hope that you do. And again, both of these will be recorded. You will get them in your email, and we do hope that you share with your colleagues widely, because we think that this information is so important and really needs to be shared widely. So again, our optimistic closure here, you pick one of these that you can share in the chat. What are some gems of wisdom that you gathered from people today or the content shared today? What's something from the heart or how you feel now? What new ideas did you dig up? Or what ideas, thoughts, or points of view grew for you today? I love seeing your answers rolling in. I feel inspired, really excited for the NCMA exhibit, and hope schools will plan for inclusive field trips. I agree. I believe that using this thinking and approach stands to benefit all students. Of course, we have actually talked about that not all students are identified, right? Just because a student doesn't have a diagnosis or a label doesn't mean that they might not still have some of these needs or behaviors. As I was reading through those examples of behaviors, I saw so many that all 3 of my children do. So there's really things that could make learning the arts more accessible to all students. And then let's see, grateful for our partners, loved hearing from the North Carolina Symphony, NCMA, and their programs. So inspiring. Our arts organizations are really doing some wonderful work and really wanting to help all teachers across the state to do this as well. It's an inspiration that there are people working outside of our field who come up with such creative ways to include our students. I think that is perfect and sums it up in a nutshell right there. So much that we can learn from them and benefit and see the great things they're doing and how we can apply them into our schools. And Betsy shares that Max has never forgotten those arts teachers who accommodated him, and that's how you create arts lovers. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. All right. Next, we
All
will
right. And
go ahead, Brandon. It's you.
thank you. I was going to say, as we move forward, we just want to make sure that everyone receives their CEU credit. So please make sure that you take the time to fill out the survey so that you can receive that credit. We have a slightly new procedure, so you will not be receiving your CEU certificate automated immediately, but you should receive it within 24 hours. So if you do not, please feel free to reach out to me to double check to ensure that I got it. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you so much to our wonderful presenters for sharing your time and your expertise with us. We really appreciate you. And again, all of you who are here to participate, we hope that you share all of this wonderful information. And again, feel free to reach out to us if you need anything. We will stick around for just a couple of minutes. If you do have any questions, you are welcome to either put them in the chat or unmute once we stop the recording. So again, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.